Evil forces track the pack to the Motel Glen Capri. Derek and Jennifer grow closer, and Scott and Stiles reveal their brotherhood. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is the Fandom Realm. And today I am reviewing my number 2 episode of Teen Wolf, and that is Motel California from Season 3, Episode 6. As always, spoilers are involved, so just be aware. I will say before I start the recap here that this is probably most people's number 1 episode. I think a lot of folks out there consider this the gold standard, the number 1 all-time episode. Not for me, but it is number 2. The number 1, the number 2, and the number 3 episodes are all the episodes that when I turn on the TV and just want to watch some Teen Wolf, those are the 3 episodes I always watch. Now, we are down to our last 2 episodes, so today is going to be number 2, and then in a few days, maybe about a week, we're going to put out the number 1 Teen Wolf episode. And I don't think it'll be all that surprising, but that is coming up. And then, of course, we are down to less than 2 weeks from the premiere of the Teen Wolf movie. So with that, let's get started on this recap, and it's going to be very similar to the previous recaps in that I'm actually going to call each section, section 1, section 2, section 3, and then I'm going to put some time codes in the video so you can go through at your own pace. And the only thing is, these episodes are so much going on in them that some of them, the sections are combined. So it's not just one part of the storyline in each section. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. So we're going to start out in Motel California, and it's going to be a flashback. And what we see is a pickup truck pulling into the Motel Glen Capri, and that's going to be identified as being in Fairville, California. And with that, basically we're given a date because we get to see a paper of March 5th, 1977. The truck pulls up to the Motel Glen Capri, and we see a man get out, and he has a wound in his leg, and it's obviously covered in blood. So the man is going to get a room at the hotel. It's room number 217. And once he gets into the room, he's going to pull his shirt up. He's going to examine his torso, and he finds a bite of a werewolf. And with that, he knows what's going to happen. He was bit by an alpha, and so he fears turning into a werewolf. Now, we also get to see the Argent necklace that he's wearing, so we know he's a werewolf hunter. He's a member of the Argent family. And so what he actually does is, as the moon starts to come up, he pulls out his sawed-off shotgun, places it under his chin, and as his eyes change color to bright yellow, he's going to mutter the words. He actually said it in French, but I'm going to do the translation here. "We hunt those that hunt us," and he is going to pull the trigger, and he kills himself. And we see, as he's laying in a pool of blood, a driver's license that says his name was Alexander Argent. Now, I was very interested back when this episode first came out. This was a very good opening. I think you all know so far through all these episodes we've gone through so far how much I enjoy the openings of Teen Wolf. I think they're the best openings that any show has ever had. And so establishing the Glen Capri was very important. Establishing that basically an alpha had killed another family member of the Argents. We didn't know who it was at the moment. We will find that out later in the storyline, but I thought it was nice that they set all that about. And basically Alexander Argent basically killed himself, almost like he shot himself, and Allison's mom stabbed herself, but they both, as they were about to turn, instead of becoming a werewolf, they decided to end it. Now, on to section 2, and we're back in the present day. And of course, if you remember the last episode, everybody was on their trip to a cross-country meet that got canceled. Well, everything's taking too long, and we're in the present day, and the Beacon County school bus is going to pull into this motel because, quite frankly, it's too far to continue home, and they're going to spend the night. pretty much the entire team comments on the low quality of the hotel, and Coach is going to warn everybody that, of course, the meet was postponed, and they are going to be spending the night, and they're going to be staying with, they're going to have 2 people to a room, and he tells them to not have any sexual perversions, and he also calls them little deviants. Of course, that is completely Coach. And as the bus pulls away to park, Allison is noticing Lydia is sort of just standing there staring, and Allison explains that they're just staying one night, and Lydia tells her a lot can happen in one night. Basically, not a lot to talk about on section 2 here, but just the idea, Coach, always the comedian, always the comic relief in this episode, and so you basically see a situation here where, he's assuming all the kids are going to go get in rooms and have sex and do immoral things, and so he just warns them about it. And with that, also Allison and Lydia, especially Lydia, understanding through her powers, which people still don't understand, she's going to be in a situation where she's feeling that something is going to go wrong. Now, section number 3, we're going to skip, and this is a short section, but it's mostly, it's with Scott and Stiles, and they're actually going to be in the room talking about the 9 or 10 suspects and who is doing their human sacrifices. And of course, Stiles' list includes a very long line of people. It actually includes Derek twice. That's why he had 10 instead of 9. And then actually, Stiles is going to remind Scott that Stiles was the one in season 2 who said that Matt was the Kanema master and was responsible for those deaths, and that he knew that long before everything happened. Now, with that section, not really much to talk about there. This is just showing the Scott and Stiles relationship, which this episode is pretty heavy with. On to section 4, and this is going to be a little bit longer here, but it's going to combine a couple things too, at least to start with. And we're actually going to flash back to Derek's loft in Beacon Hills, where Jennifer is struggling to help a badly injured Derek get inside the loft. He's exhausted. She has been helping him out since basically when he and Ennis had fought, and they had fallen at that distillery or warehouse or whatever it was. And so with that, he is really not in a very good place. Flash to that abandoned warehouse or mall or whatever it was. And there was the big battle in the one episode, and we get to see Chris trying to piece together the clues and trying to see what happened. Of course, he's looking for footprints. He's seeing where there were flashbang arrows, different things like that, and trying to put together the story of what had happened there. Now, as we go back to the hotel, things are not going exactly right, and nobody really realizes it to start with. We see Scott looking in the mirror, his eyes flash alpha red real quickly. Stiles is going to find some snacks, and Boyd is acting really strange and actually bashes in the glass of the snack machine. It's like he's in a trance or something like that. Allison's in the shower, and Lydia has gone to get towels. Scott comes into the room and just sort of startles her and acts like he's sort of in a daze. He acts like he's sort of out of it, sort of like Boyd was. And he does walk towards her for a second and tells her they should be closer friends and could perhaps fix their relationship. He does grab her hand, but suddenly snaps out of the daze and leaves. Lydia goes to the motel clerk for new towels, and she explains the ones in their room are definitely not smoke-free. The clerk, when she turns around, is a little scary. She's got a tracheotomy tube in her throat, probably from smoking. And as she gives Lydia new towels, Lydia notices a series of numbers framed on the motel office wall, and the number is 198. When she asks about it, the clerk explains that the 40-year-old motel has the highest number of suicides in all of California, and they currently are at number 198 and counting. Now, back in Isaac and Boyd's room. They are sharing their roommates. Isaac flips through the channels on the TV, but it's all static on the TV. Channel numbers go from 199 to 200 to 201. Now, some thoughts on this. It's just obvious that something was wrong with the werewolves here. And maybe Lydia a little bit, but Lydia was just gathering information here. But with the wolves, they seem to be in a trance. Early on, when I remember watching this the first time, I was wondering what was going on. Of course, that is explained later as well. And you just sort of wondered, how was this going to be resolved? And so that's something that is going to basically be supernatural. And it was a little eerie. One of the great things I loved about Teen Wolf was it sort of rode that line. Sometimes it stepped over into horror just a little bit, but then it would sort of pull its foot back and ride that line some more. And it was just always creepy enough to keep you interested in it. And it was never a happy thing. It was sort of always sort of on that creepy side. The comedy was normally to lighten the mood. And I really liked the contrast between those in all of Teen Wolf. Now, on to section 5. And again, we're going to combine some things here. Argent's still at the mall, and he's on the phone with Allison, and she asks him if he knows anything about the Glen Capri, and he doesn't really know, although it seems like he's familiar with it, but it seems like one of those things where it's on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't think of it. And he offers to come and get her, but in the end, she basically tells him it's only an overnight stay. It's not going to be that bad. And actually, after he hangs up is when he actually notices some evidence, basically from her arrows, that suggests she was involved in the battle at the mall. And of course, at this point, she wasn't supposed to be battling. She was supposed to be being nice Allison, who was just going to school, was not fighting werewolves any. Now, we also move on to Derek's loft again, and Jennifer is taking off what's left of his shirt, and she is totally shocked by his injuries. She's going to basically be able to put all that, sort of compartmentalize it, and she is sort of shocked. She thinks he's obviously good looking. When she gets everything off and sees his chest, she actually said the quote about it would be for your unbelievable physique if it weren't for the fact that you were bleeding black blood. So she's able to handle this supernatural stuff that's going on. And Derek is going to pass out, and she is basically sitting there begging him not to die. And she does listen for his heartbeat, which she does hear. Back to this, the big thing here is just trying to push Jennifer and Derek together here. And of course, now we know that Jennifer wasn't all freaked out about what was going on because she has a history with supernaturals. But, when you first watched this, you sort of wondered, how's she taking this so well? And then Argent still doing his investigation and finally figuring out that Allison was part of that battle. So there's going to be some talking that's going to need to happen between those two. On to part 6. And basically what's going to happen is Lydia is figuring out the numbers. Over 40 years, there have been 4.95 suicides per year. And it just seems weird to her that you would have that high of a number, and also that you would actually post it in your office. And Lydia actually goes through and talks about and lists some of the different ways people committed suicide, everything from hanging themselves to a shotgun in the mouth. And of course, we know who the shotgun in the mouth was from earlier. While Lydia is talking, she's going to hear some voices through the air vent, and it sounds like a couple getting ready to kill themselves. Lydia stands and turns toward the vent. She climbs up and stands on the bed to get closer to it, and the male voice is talking about them killing themselves. And the two lovers declare their love for one another, and the male begins a countdown, and we hear a gunshot. Throughout the exchange, air is flowing through the vent, and after the gunshot, it's like there's no airflow. So something was going on there. And of course, Allison didn't hear any of this. Now, Lydia, because it freaked her out, is actually going to run over to room number 217 and find that it's under construction. There's no dead couple over there, but in the grain of the wood, she's going to notice what appears to be two faces screaming back at her. Now, talking about section 6 here, this is an important section because we're really establishing the suicides here and that bad things happen here. And there's something supernatural going on as well, because Lydia was the only one that heard these things in the vent. Allison didn't hear them. And Lydia heard a lot of the conversation. And so with that, it's obvious that Lydia is tapping in to what's going on more so than anybody else. Now, moving on to section number 7, we're going to see Boyd is getting some ice out of a ice machine, and he keeps hearing voices saying, "Don't leave me." And when he digs down into the ice, basically he's going to uncover a face of a young girl, and she opens her eyes, and Boyd drops the bucket and backs away. It seems like this is supposed to maybe be his younger sister or some girl he knew that had died. Moving on, Lydia wants to leave, but Allison doesn't see any danger because the deaths were suicide, not murders, and so she didn't feel like it could be haunted or anything like that. Lydia is also wondering why the room is under construction, the 217. She doesn't really get an answer for that. We're going to be back into Isaac and Boyd's room, and Isaac's laying on the bed with his eyes closed, and he starts to hear noises, sort of like tools and chains, and basically what's going to end up happening is he's going to be replaying in his head something from his earlier life when his dad was abusing him. It was something about a wrench and a wrench size, and his dad ended up, there was a stripped bolt, and his dad ended up boxing him into a freezer, and we're going to get to see the lid slam down. While all this is happening, Isaac is basically hiding beneath the comforter on the bed. And with that, this section adds some ideas from a couple different characters. And with that, the big thing here is some of these characters, of course, we have and the wolves, Boyd, we have Isaac, who are apparently reliving traumatic experiences from their lives. And so something is causing them to do that. And of course, we don't know why yet. And then, of course, Lydia and Allison, sort of being just who they are sort of discounting everything that's going on, which is probably dangerous because they know what life around the pack is like, and so they probably should be expecting some bad things to happen. Now on to section 8. We visit the motel office again, and when Lydia was there earlier, it was at number 198. Now as Allison enters the picture, she sees a 201, and the clerk is out until the next morning, so they're not able to get any type of answers about what Lydia had heard earlier. And Allison does sort of wonder why the numbers increased. We're going to skip to Scott's room, and he is on a phone call with his mom, and she seems upset. And basically what's going to happen here is he looks outside, and his mom is outside. Deucalion has her, and she's going to basically have her throat ripped out by Deucalion's claws right there in front of Scott on the pavement. Stiles is going to enter the room, and Scott looks away from the window, which sort of breaks that trance and breaks the hallucination he was having. And Stiles is going to get a text from Lydia at that point, and basically it says that need to talk to you, just you, and it's 12:21. Again, on this, I'm going to tell you, it was really glaring. It was bothersome to see this scene with Deucalion and Melissa. You know, everybody knew it was fake. She wasn't dying, but just that thought, it sort of gave me chills. And the idea also that we had gone from 198 to 201. To be honest, I still had not put 2 and 2 together about the number of werewolves and everything that was there at the hotel. So, we're halfway through now, and, I still was pretty much in the dark about what was going to happen here. Now, on to section 9. And this was one of those things where it appeared that it was going to get a little steamy because Danny and Ethan were sharing a room. And we basically pan through, and there's shoes and socks and shirt and clothes laying all over the place. And Ethan and Danny are on the bed, basically just wearing jeans and boots, and they're making out. And Ethan makes fun of Danny for bringing books and studying. eating, and that's when Ethan opens Danny's shirt and begins to kiss his chest, and he finds a scar. And basically the scar was from a time when Danny had to have some misshapen cartilage corrected, and they had to put a bar in his chest when he was 14 to support his sternum. And with that, Ethan asks him if he would like to make that disappear. Of course, that's hinting that he could make him into a werewolf and change him, and he wouldn't have to worry about it. And probably not a surprise, but Danny actually tells him that he doesn't want to get rid of this. It was something that made him who he is today. And so with that, they're going to continue to kiss, and suddenly something's wrong with Ethan's back. There's ripples. It looks like something's trying to fight out of his spine, and he's going to jump off of Danny and run into the bathroom and look in the mirror, and he sees a hand and face begin to push out of the skin of his stomach, actually, and he's going to return to the room, throw on clothes, and run out. And we don't know where at that moment. Basically, I really liked this scene because with the alphas, especially the alpha twins, Ethan and Aiden are different, but with that, I like that they showed them both caring for somebody. Of course, Ethan caring for Danny and Aiden caring for Lydia, and I like that they showed that. I also liked in this scene they showed that Danny sort of understood life. He understood that what people go through in their life actually builds their character. So if you took that away from them, maybe they wouldn't be the person who they are. And I think that was a very important sort of lesson to Ethan as well, which of course Ethan didn't really get it, I don't think, at the time. Now, off to part 10, and Stiles, Allison, and Lydia are discussing how weird the werewolves are acting, and Lydia, of course, is still wanting to leave the hotel. She actually grabs a Bible out of the drawer, and that's when clippings from newspapers fall out, and they realize that each room's Bible has the clippings of the suicides happened in the Bible. So someone shot themselves in the room. When it came out in the newspaper, the clippings from the newspaper were put in the Bible in that room, which is a little more than creepy, I think. And the articles were just many different ones about people who were coming for love, who were trying to escape, just different types of people trying to escape their lives. They do speculate that there are probably clippings in all the rooms, and so that leads Lydia to investigate about the couple she had heard earlier in room 217. So they go out the door and they find 217 locked, and they hear a skill saw inside. They bust into the room and find Ethan holding the saw, preparing to slice into his stomach. Stiles rushes forward and begins to wrestle control of the saw away from Ethan. Lydia sees the power cord, and she goes over and unplugs it just as Stiles falls to the floor, and the saw stops just inches away from doing some damage to our boy Stiles. Ethan extends his claws to rip open his torso, and Stiles and Allison grab him. Eventually, he stumbles into a heater, and it knocks him out of the hallucination he's in, and he quickly leaves the room. So, loved Allison, Lydia, and Stiles here. I loved how Stiles immediately went to save Ethan. He's not a big fan of Ethan, and so he saw someone in need. He went and helped them. And, I think this is one of the reasons why Stiles, to me, was so popular. Yes, he realized sometimes people were maybe not your friend, but you shouldn't let them die, okay? Basically, to have that attitude. And so I really enjoyed that part of this episode. And, of course, we were also shown here how to get the wolves out of their hallucinations. Now, moving on to section 11. Back at Derek's loft, Derek's trying to get out of bed, but his injuries are just too bad. He's going to tell Jennifer that he's got to find the others. They think he's dead. He doesn't want anything crazy happening. And, of course, Jennifer, being an English teacher, points out to him how many characters in literature use fake deaths to their advantage, and they're still flirting with each other. Now, back to the Glen Capri, and Ethan is refusing to talk to Stiles. Lydia and Allison, back at the Glen Capri, Capri, Ethan is refusing to talk to Stiles, Lydia, and Allison about his suicide attempt. He says he doesn't know what he was doing, and Stiles points out that he should be more helpful since they just saved his life. And, Ethan responds to him that he probably shouldn't have saved his life. While Allison goes off to find Scott, another important part is going to happen because Stiles, very reluctantly, brings up a theory he's working on with Lydia, and he asks her if she can remember any other time there were any crazy events with werewolves. And the point he is bringing up is the time when she poisoned everybody with wolfsbane at her party. And of course, this is when they revived Peter. We're also going to see Boyd sitting on the bed. The radio turns itself on, but we're seeing static. It's reading 1246. He switches it off, and we get to hear a man's voice asking him questions. Again, this is about, basically, it looks like his sister fell through some ice when she was skating, and Boyd wasn't able to help her, so she ended up dying. Boyd turns the radio off and back on. You still get to hear some of this conversation with the boy, and the man's voice is trying to comfort Boyd. He's going to grab the radio off the nightstand, and although it is unplugged, he's still hearing the voices until Boyd ends up crushing the radio. Now, back at the loft, Derek seems to be feeling better. He's starting to heal, but Jennifer shouldn't be near him because everyone around him gets hurt. At least that's what he says, and she says she's been hurt before and has a feeling about him. They begin to kiss, and we're going to skip back to the motel at this point, and Boyd enters the motel office and steals the safe. Now, with all this, not a ton of things to say here, but I did like the way they brought up what had happened at Lydia's birthday party earlier in Teen Wolf, and that Stiles was thinking about that. And of course, Stiles is trying to be the little investigator here, which he was the whole time. And I thought this was a very interesting section. Again, them putting Derek and Jennifer together as well, and of course, we thought that was interesting, and we got to see what Boyd's long-lost issue was. Okay, moving on to section number 12, and this has a lot happening. Now, Allison heads to Scott's room. He's not there. Stiles is still apologizing to Lydia because he was suspecting her, and Lydia's going to hear a baby crying and a mother yelling, and it seems to be coming from a drainage grate. She's trying to get more information on it. She kneels closer, and at that point, we're going to be back in Boyd's room. The bathtub is full of water, and he's going to submerge himself and set the safe on top of him. He's trying to drown himself. Stiles and Lydia rush to the room. They find Boyd. While they're trying to get the safe off of him, Stiles is going to put his hand back on the heater and burns himself. That's when he remembers what happened to Ethan in the room 217 earlier, and that gives him an idea. So he actually goes and gets a flare from the bus, and he lights it, and he burns Boyd, and that actually causes Boyd to wolf out, and he throws the safe off of him and gets out of the water. You also will see Stiles looking for our boy Isaac, who has seemingly disappeared. Lydia actually saw him under the bed, so Stiles is going to look for him under the bed, and he holds the flare out and burns Isaac, and we don't get to see that. That's done off camera, but he burns Isaac, and that basically means now Boyd and Isaac have both been pulled out of their trances. And this brings us to probably the most emotional moment ever in Teen Wolf, maybe with the exception of Allison's death. And what's going to happen is Lydia and Stiles find Allison, and they go looking for Scott and find him standing in the parking lot dripping with gasoline. He has poured gasoline from somewhere over top of him. It is leaking out everywhere, and it's spreading. He's got one of those road flares, and it is lit, and he basically is telling everybody that there's no hope for him. There's no hope for Derek. And during that whole scene, one thing I was a little turned off on was that they actually cut this scene back and forth to Derek and Jennifer hooking up. I didn't really like that. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but I would have liked to have not had that to cut back and forth to. I thought it took a little bit away from the actual scene. But staying on Scott here, here. He is mourning for his life before he was bitten and became a werewolf, and says it was better when he was a no one. He wasn't good at lacrosse, not popular, not special, and he would rather be a no one. That's when our boy Stiles steps forward, and he steps forward into the gas, and tears are streaming. Everybody's watching, just bawling, I would imagine. Tears are streaming down his face, and he explains to Scott that he is someone, he is his best friend, and that he is his brother. He stepped into the gasoline, and he tells Scott that if he's going to kill himself, he's going to have to take Stiles with him. Stiles slowly grabs Scott's hand and eventually pries the flare away and flings it away. It lands on a dry piece of pavement, but begins to roll slowly towards the pooling gasoline. Lydia sees what's happening and throws herself at Scott and Stiles, pushing them out of harm's way. As the fuel explodes, Lydia sees a cloaked figure with a deformed face in the flames. Listen, just a response here. There's two emotional scenes that, if they're not equal, they're just close. This scene with Scott and Stiles, then Allison's death, and then the third scene that is there as well is in the hospital when Stiles is going through the MRI and possibly has the same thing that killed his mother. Those three scenes actually are probably, to me, three of the best scenes in Teen Wolf. And with that, the most emotional. And it's hard to actually even talk about it without getting a little choked up and having a tear flow, because you realized how close Scott and Stiles always have been. But the fact that Stiles, he could have died here. I mean, if Scott would have dropped that flare, they would have literally burnt to death. But this can't be a surprise for us because we do know they're very close, but also we see Stiles do things like save Ethan's life. I mean, he was wrestling an alpha werewolf over a skill saw to try to save his life when he really could have been justified in just letting Ethan take his life. And that wasn't something he wanted to do. And he wasn't Ethan's friend. So when Scott was in this situation, there was no way he wasn't going to try to save him. And just the tears and everything in the scene, wow, I'll tell you, this is my favorite scene in all 100 episodes of Teen Wolf. And I think this is a scene also that probably makes, I would say, 90% of the people who have this ranked number one as the number one episode. I think this scene is probably what does it. And I understand it, completely understand it. It affects people. Now, moving on to part 13, and this is going to be the end. Okay, so we're going to put everything else in. And we cut to the next morning, and the team is leaving. Coach actually comes out to the bus, and he already finds Boyd and Isaac, Lydia, Allison, Stiles, Scott. They're sleeping on the bus, and he announces that the meet's been canceled, so they're going home. Ethan thanks Scott for saving his life, although it was actually Stiles, and then Ethan tells him that Derek is actually still alive. He also warns him that the death of Ennis, for which Ethan blames Derek, they don't know that Deucalion actually finished Ennis off. But basically, Ethan warns him that now one of two things have to happen. Derek's either going to join the Alpha Pack, or Callie is going to hunt him down and kill him. At this point, Lydia is going to notice a purple stain on Coach's shirt, and when she blows the whistle, she's going to basically blow out all of this purple wolf's bane. And she notices what it is. She is going to tell Stiles about it. And she realizes everyone on the bus had gotten dosed with wolfsbane because the coach had been blowing that stupid thing all the time. And the Duroc had caused the hallucinations. So as they get ready to pull off, Lydia hands Stiles the whistle, and Stiles pitches it out the window. It gets yelled at by Coach. Flash, we see Chris Argent opening a door, and there's someone sitting in a wheelchair, and we get to see his shaking hands, and we finally realize it's Gerard. And this is the first time in episode 3 we really get to see that Gerard has survived. Black ooze is leaking out of his nose and his mouth, and Chris actually tells him about Alexander Argent and the Motel Glen Capri, and he wants to know who was the alpha that bit Alexander Argent. And Gerard replies, Deucalion. And with that, Motel California comes to an end. Now, with that, this is just sort of a wrap up. So a lot of things going on here. The big two things here, that Wolfsbane was causing problems. I know there's some people out there that just have to look at problems that want to know, well, that wasn't a lot of Wolfsbane, actually. How could that affect them like that? And I don't know that we actually ever saw how Wolfsbane affected werewolves for the most part. And if you're getting small doses over a long amount of time, it may affect you differently than getting a lot at once and cause you to do things like have hallucinations. And so a lot of people criticize that scene for that, but I thought it was well played. Jennifer Blake, of course, we know she is the Duroc. I'm not playing with that matter anymore. If you're watching this review, you know that already. But she, being a teacher at school, would possibly have some access to Coach's whistle. So she, of course, could have dosed it. And then, of course, the reveal that Gerard is alive and that Alexander Argent was killed by Deucalion. And so that basically sets up that the Argents do have issues with Deucalion. And, of course, we know how that's going to come to a head later on. We also get what happens in Visionary to get some backstory, but it sort of fills in some pieces for us in the story. And I thought this episode did a really good job of that. Now, with all that, guys, I hope you enjoyed this recap and review. I really enjoyed, especially episode or number 3, which was Visionary. I really enjoyed talking about Motel California, number 2 here, and I'm really excited to bring you next week, number 1, and I will tell you it is from season number 1. Not going to tell you which episode yet, but I've really enjoyed going back and recapping through Teen Wolf, and it has actually brought my expectations for the Teen Wolf movie up even more. I know everyone's disappointed because it doesn't have Stiles in it, but I think we need to be excited for what it's going to be and judge that movie for what it's going to be. And let's see what happens. I think if things turn out good enough, this thing could maybe get us another movie or two, maybe a series, some grown-up folks from Beacon Hills. I mean, it's not like Tyler Posey and is doing a whole lot out there. He's not starring in a lot. They could bring him back along with quite a few other people on that cast. So here's hoping, and here's waiting for number 1 next week, and just appreciating how great this episode really was. And I completely understand the people who have it ranked number 1. So with that, have a great day. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below, and I'll see you next time on the Fandom Realm.